We would like to start with our first speaker, architect Ejaz Ahed, for the first day of the conference. Architect Ejaz Ahed received his architectural training from the renowned Illinois Institute of Technology, IIT in Chicago. He went on to work with the Chicago office of SOM. In 1977, he joined the architectural practice of Ahad Associates, a 13-year-old firm founded by his father, and became its CEO in 1978, a position he still retains. He has gone on to design major institutional and office building projects. His firm has won several awards and collaborates with many international partners. In 2010, his firm won the US-based SCUP Society of College and University Planning 2010 Merit Award for Excellence in Design of the new campus of Habib University, Karachi, first ever to be won by a Pakistani design firm. He is involved in education, social work, and has also served the profession of architecture as president of the Institute of Architects Pakistan and represented Pakistan at numerous Asian forums. He is the chairman and trustee with the Foundation for the Museum of Modern Art, FOMA, Pakistan. Mr. Ejaz Ahed, please grace us with your presence to the stage.
I have some sitting problems, so I may need to sit down just in case. So we have standby arrangements. Okay. Let's see. You know, one of the first things I noticed is this designing narratives. In this whole seminar, the first thing I learned, I wonder, which one is working? Is mine working or this working? Can I shut this off? The first narrative I've learned today is that in designing, the sponsor gets more time than the speaker. Okay. Well, that's the future. Unless you're sponsored, nothing happens. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, President Arif Changezi, my distinguished colleagues and friends, sponsors, whoever, all the ladies and gentlemen, whatever. They say that all good architecture must have a narrative. So they want me to tell a story. So I thought I'd take a story of a whole century. And I asked Bisma, I said, how can I tell a story of a century in 20 minutes? He said, well, that's your problem, okay? You've got to make it into a short story, all right? So here goes, here's my short story. Once upon a time, for most of you Karachiites, you may be able to understand. Once upon a time in a land far, far away, on the other side of Clifton Bridge, lived an architect who had great clients and contractors who were so nice to him, and he lived happily ever after. So that kind of sums up the thing, at least for 70 years. But as we finish, that's fine, thank you. As we finish the talk, you will realize what I have just said, that we lived happily ever after. This may have a meaning at the end of the talk. If you don't believe it, that's fine now. But this lecture actually took place or was thought about because a couple of weeks ago we did a thing at the Bauhaus, on the Bauhaus at NED, and we kind of realized that the ability to define modern architecture started to become a little blurry. And we really began to think, has modern architecture actually finished, as some architects would like to have us believe? So I went back and I said, look, why don't we look back at a century? And so here is a little analysis of a summary. So that's kind of the origin of the talk. So in real written terms, the main storyline of architecture in the 20th century is that of the development of modernism and various reactions to it. Most of us use the term modern to refer to something that is of its time, perhaps even up to the minute and fashionable. But from the 1920s or so, in avant-garde circles, the term modern came to refer to a particular approach by a group of architects who sought to cast off historical precedent and develop something entirely new and different for their own time. World War I did not help any, and they also thought that the old ways of the European system were wrong, were a failure. Modern architects saw historical styles developed in response to irrelevant and potentially decadent architecture. They rejected ornamentation as frivolous and outdated, seeking instead to create an entirely new aesthetic based on the needs and opportunities of the materials and structural approaches, such as reinforced concrete and steel frames. So over the course of the 19th century, following the birth of the Industrial Revolution, I have to have this background set as a baseline for you to understand when we get off to the pictorial part of it. Architects in the 20th century continued this exploration of the Industrial Revolution, giving us newer and more experimentable possibilities with man and material. Okay? So in the latter part of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th in the Western countries, it was common for architecture to revive historical styles, such as classic and Gothic. Breaking with the past, a strain of architects of the 20th century discontinued this tradition in order to create a more appropriate style for the modern age. So since this is a very, very large subject, I'm kind of going to limit this talk to kind of few brief narratives originating mostly in US and Europe. The reason being is that that's what we have grown up to see. What we see. And believe me, this is not as serious a structure that you should do it. Please smile when you feel like it, because this is just something that one has learned of history, present history, and what we think is coming up. At the beginning of the 20th century, some architects saw industrialization as a new advantage to be embraced and celebrated, represented in this lecture in the international style. Others saw the Industrial Revolution as a negative assault on culture, a tendency that caused architects to blatantly disregard the foundational styles of architectural history. So, in the subject, I have referred to fashion also. The main connection of fashion and architecture is the correlation of art. Their aesthetic part segregates them from the rest of the sciences and inserts them to the world of fine arts. There are many times when a garment or a building stands out as a piece of art or has artistic inspiration roots. Nature played a crucial role to this situation. Most of the times when the morphology is inspired from nature forms, the result is very, very original. So using that as a base, I'd like to now take you through a quick narrative of thing. I need a slide changer, please. For those of you who are wondering on the first slide here, no. Don't change anything. I want the slide changed. I'll change the slides. This kind of brings fashion. For those who want to know, just the cover itself here, the two buildings are called the Marilyn Monroe buildings. Their actual name is Marilyn Monroe Towers. They exist in Toronto. They are built, not doing very well commercially, but they're built. And so I thought bringing Marilyn into kind of gives us a merger into the thing of form, fashion, and technology. I think these three things have, in this century particularly, have taken a very, very important part. So let me get back. In the beginning, Building, I'm starting very, very easily. Building was very heavy work, but very simple. Okay, so it was easy. And then we got to the Parthenon to look at it in 440. Why do I have 447 BC done so much? It shows why. Because suddenly we get to 1922, that's about 2,500 years later, we were building this. Okay, so we began to wonder, where did we go? Why are we still here? Why are we doing similar things? Why haven't we grown in 2,500 years? Look at this, 1935, US Supreme Court. Okay, let me go back and to add to this little note, a couple of days ago, President Trump announced that all federal buildings should look like this, and there must be a new law. You know that? He just announced it, and the AIA has actually rejected it. They said, you cannot, the President Trump cannot tell us how to build a building. And because he said, all federal building, government building must look like this. This is hardly 10 days ago. Okay. So anyway, so here we were in this time of confusion. And the reason we've taken American is this is what our exposure is. So please understand the basis of where I come from. People thought, okay, there was a great Columbian exposition in Chicago in 1890, and people said, oh, we're going to build new architecture, we're going to start a new front, and everything will change from now on. The new century will start. And this is what they built. And we were wondering how far in the future we went. Did we go or did we not? It's just going back to our earlier centuries. So where were we going? They were not getting a direction. And America, being a new country, always looked to Europe for inspiration and perspiration. They said we're willing to do the perspiration, but the inspiration has to come. They get very easily influenced by whatever. And at the same time, the reason I'm giving you this is at the same time, Frank Lloyd Wright was doing his Unity Temple architecture on the side and on his own. I'm trying to keep to the larger works as much as possible so that there is a view. So what happened in this period that we were all wondering about? The Chicago Tribune again said in 1921 that we want to build in a new architecture. Again, we are not finding, we're looking at all these old buildings coming up, okay? So they held a competition. And they had all these kinds of entries for the competition. They said, this is going to be the future, okay? So, and if you look at something, this was Eero Saarinen's entry. So you can see all these modernists, what they were doing at one point in time. This is Walter Gropius's entry for the Chicago Tribune building. Okay, again, the exposure of the frame and water. And this is what won the competition, and this is the built building. Again, so where did we go? Did we go backwards? Did we go whatever? And this is the time where in Europe, the Bauhaus was beginning to take shape at the same time that the US was doing this. And of course, engineering advances had taken place. The frame building, this is only given as an example of a frame building. But the frame building means that you didn't have to have a solid building look. It should have punched windows, and you let more light in and whatever. And it's important now to look at this time to see things that bring about a change. So I kind of looked at what are the great inventions that changed history. Okay, we pretty much know about these. bulb, the light, domestication of the horse. And with the 20th century, rapid economic development, with the time of plenty, increase in urbanization, cities got larger. Political, economic events affected architecture. Advance in technology gave rise to new artistic forms, okay, and spaces and time, okay? And for the 20th century, they say that these are the few things that truly, truly changed the way we live today. As glass, refrigeration is, or air conditioning as we call it, this was the invention of this century, water purification. But you look at not just pure water purification, we saw what I haven't shown here is the advent of the sewage system. It took all the dog shit, all the horse shits off the roads, and it put them under the road, and they could clean it up, and your sewage could disappear. So the health systems became very good also, really. And you know, if you get to a story, in Chicago they had to raise so many buildings because they jacked up entire buildings, huge buildings, just jacked them up with jacks. And the reason they did that is that the invert levels for the new sewage system or whatever didn't have to be so low, so as to create an exit. Okay, so many different styles, structuralism, constructivism, formalism, and these were, by the way, these were all named by architects. They were not named, or maybe an art critic. Maybe these were the only people that just kept naming all these architecture styles. So I'm not going to go. I could have gone into each style, but you know we won't. So we looked at this period in the 20s to the 40s, for example. Before Bauhaus people actually moved in, we were looking at the Art Deco period. Okay, the RCA building, the Art Deco. You again looked at how design was designed, and here, look at this. The Art Deco went from the earring to the entrance, the doors, the physical nature, to applicable to buildings. See here. We all remember this Art Deco thing. It wasn't easy to do, but I think they had some of the detailing was very nice, if you ask me. Then, of course, 1933, 1934 onward. Now there was a plus or minus here and there. The Bauhaus movement came in. That means, you know, Mr. Gropius himself came across, Mies van der Rohe came across, and these guys. Now Gropius is really one landmark building that's left behind is the Pan Am building. Most of it, other things were smaller. And then, of course, Mies came on the line. Now, Mies became very popular because he brought in, of course, the non-ornamented things and his famous theory of less is more. Look what he was saying. Individual is losing significance. His destiny is no longer what interests us. They were saying art or what we do is what matters anymore. Now, how does this compares to the rise of the corporation in America at the same time, where in the corporation the human being was being reduced to a number, just a number. You know, he was not very important anymore. He was just slotted, fitted somewhere, and worked. So architecture was being done to please themselves and the masters. And one interesting thing, this is one of Mises' sketches while in Germany. They were dreaming of glass facades in Germany, which they couldn't do. There. Economics, World War II, World War I, whatever you want to say. And this is something that they could do here. And this is what he did when he did come to America, where is the introduction of the skin. So this talk could be a lot about skins, because that's the clothing that architecture engulfs and wears. Okay, the heavy buildings and the light look on the new buildings all became the new ideas, in it. And these were then convinced all the developers, this is the best thing that's ever happened to America, blah, blah, blah. Of course, they did have a very, very strong philosophy into saying, yes, you can build tall buildings with glass above, but the lower levels, at the human scale, things must go through. So that's very important. So you looked at that. And technology allowed everything to give you large spans. Steel, this is IIT, Department of Architecture, where some of us here, is Faruqi here? Yeah. We were locked into this place for a couple of years on it. Is a free float space. It's a free floating of the space. These concepts that they were brought in. And I'm going to just bounce over into many, many other things. So more of Mises' apartment. This is his 880 North Lakeshore apartment building. The joke here on it was always that as students you were told this is a very great complex by Mies van der Rohe. So some student got up and he asked, he said, but you teach us not to put anything on the west side and all the windows, all the glasses on the west side. So the answer used to come, well, you don't do it, Mies can do it. Mies is okay to do it, okay? So there's a story. Parallel, the reason I'm saying this, in parallel, Frank Lloyd Wright was doing his Guggenheim Museum. So I'm saying that the interplay of very different things that were happening. Now look at this. This is, literally 1949, 50. The UN building. Can you imagine that early, this glass skyscraper there, the curtain wall, the glass as a skin was done. And of course, Oscar Niemeyer and even I think a couple of people were involved in this. From then on, since this glass thing caught shape, what happened was all of Miesian influenced students started doing, and one of the biggest influenced companies, of course, was Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. This is the Lever House in New York, which is now a landmark building and whatever. First curtain wall. Now these are all affected student works. All affected student works. Okay. This is Lake Point Towers in Chicago. This is just finished when I got into the US. And these were two of Mises' students. And they did a clover leaf. I mean, you didn't do anything but boxes with Mies, but here was a clover leaf. Now these two architects, John Heinrich and George Shipwright, smart people. You know what they did? They said, okay, we won't take any fee, but we will own 2.5% of your building. Okay? Those guys never had to work anymore. They lived off that money for the rest of their life, and they just taught. John Heinrich has been a teacher. So you can see how different people look at it. Then we got on to what was known as Corten steel that rusts for a while and then becomes a coating by itself. Large spans, 87-foot span. I used to work in this building also. More of Mises students. So you see how much influence the large building. This is a Time Life building. Harry Weiss was a student of Mies also. Okay? And every once in a while, I will take you back to the farm. Okay, we'll call Pakistan the farm. All right. So at that time in '56, Noitra was doing the Karachi. It was then the U.S. Embassy. Okay, and we were doing um, PIDC building, Mohammadi House. I'm just trying to imagine at the same time, what were we doing? What were we doing? You know, this is not a PWD project, I guess. It's a little later. State Bank, again, an American architect. Okay, that's very interesting because the foreign architects had their own thing. Again, the intercontinental and American architects. This is what they were doing then. British architect, Dowd Center. This is still local. I think it was what Darwala and Company that did this thing. The National Bank building, which was later put a new skin on it. So this is what was happening here. At the same time in the US, Fazlur Rahman Khan, our great former Pakistani structural engineer, he was proposing this theory of expressing structure in building, expressing. So, you know, every structure was shown, all the thing. This is also a very interesting building. This is Shell Plaza in Houston. If you look at it, looks like a curved building. The thing about it, because I was there when we were explained how at the office how it was designed, is all these waves are where the stresses are maximum. So the members were made larger. So it has a real structural sense on it. Then, of course, Fazlur Khan came with his tubular concept for the John Hancock Center, and that basically meant that buildings, as they got taller and taller in frame construction, the columns started to get so large that the space inside again became inefficient. So he said, okay, here's a tube, a pipe. He said, think of a building as a pipe and stick it into the ground. So inside of the pipe is all empty. So you stiffen a building only on the outside. And that's what the concept, this was actually a thesis at IIT that SOM as a big company could actually take a thesis and build a reality out of it. Of course, this concept became very popular all the way down to, you know, this is the Sears Tower. Again, this is a series of 9 tubes. Had a little part in it, I must say, during its thing. It was still before the computer era, so we built cardboard tubes of different heights, several thousand cardboard tubes of different heights, put rubber bands around them. And one night at 4 a.m., we said, this is going to be it, that's it. Had enough of choosing. So it's a series of 9 tubes bundled together. Again, structural, these are all part of contributions of Fazlur Rahman. These are called belt trusses. That means wherever the building will take on stresses, you strengthen that level of the building. So these are belt trusses. Meanwhile, back at the farm, and around 70, 71, Habib Bank Plaza was being done here, again by a foreign architect. My father was doing the State Bank of Pakistan building in Islamabad, same time, exactly the same time. And you can see a lot of his what's his name, this Brazilian architect, what's his name? Oscar Niemeyer. You know, you can see a lot of Oscar Niemeyer influence in it. You can see the dome effect and whatnot. This was called composite construction. Now, these were all just developments that happened. This is the only building I can lay any claim to it from day one till the day it started construction. I wasn't there. I came back to Pakistan when it was finished. They sent me a photograph of it. This is a 60-story building. It's composite construction, steel and concrete. Not steel as in reinforced steel, but sectional steel versus thing. It's a very famous building. It's still there. I went to see it a couple of years ago. One of the finest buildings Gordon Bunshaft has done for SOM is the National Commercial Bank in what it was how do you get in a desert climate? How do you get light and in with protection? So on the other side, where you see blanks here, were open to let light in. So everywhere you could get light, but never a direct sun in it. So this is, here's a nice section to show how that happened. It's really a marvelous thing that has almost not been created again. Gordon Bunshaft. There was a time when we had a lot of oil, the 73 oil crisis and whatever. California looked at all Mises buildings and they said, what is this saw-cut buildings? Everything is flat on top. Everything is flat on top. So they actually made a rule. They actually made a rule in California. They said, well, with the oil crisis, you can certainly cut down on the area of glass or whatever, but we want a cap on every building, some kind of cap. So they built all these caps on buildings. Now that cap actually affected something in the Far East also. That's the original Mandarin Hotel. So you have a very octagonal plan. Had to make it far eastern looking, so you put the cap on it. Okay, it's not fun. You can do. You see all these things with caps on it. Never a flat. This was a real trend that came about. 70s, they said, oh shit, this is bullshit. Venturi said this is a bore. Less is more is wrong. Less is a bore. So let's change it. Okay, so he said he started changing his own architecture. But interesting thing is, all these guys, Venturi, Frank Gehry, whatever, till the age of 55 to 57, they were just doing one-room additions to houses. They weren't big architects. They broke away at that age to do it. So this was what he was doing. Then, of course, Norman Foster came around, because we need to kind of wrap up on this thing. With his Gherkin building in England, the great Hong Kong Shanghai Bank. The joke on this bank is that since there was no place to put any material on this site, they had buildings on all three sides, and the front side was the road. They actually thought, and the Chinese used to joke, that when Hong Kong goes back to the Chinese, the British will unboard this building and take it back with them. Because this is all purely bolted together. Then, of course, we went into this period of a thing. This Pearl River building was energy efficiency. I won't touch on it because there's a lot on this. So you're looking at how technology started to say that we had fashion and buildings that started to becoming to look together. It wasn't, we don't know what was influencing what, but maybe both were influencing each other. Both were influencing. Then came, right at the end, the super tall building era. The super tall building era. Everybody just wanted to be the highest and the super. This is actually built in Seoul. Diagonal Tower by SOM. You know all these. You know all these. So then they said, well, okay, if the static part has to happen now, the dynamic part, building must move also now. So they started doing that. And of course, this is Mississauga, Ontario, the building. And you look at how much architecture and fashion and clothing came on it. And this century also gave us color. I think it added a lot of colors. I'm sorry I can't have to show it in many ways in this limited time. Then came Frank Gehry. He said, hey man, this is, it's got to come like this. So the fashion and the building came side by side, and they said, well, you know, if you want to, yeah, you know, take a building, you know, do this and say, well, that's what the building will be, you know, because technology could do it, only because engineering could do that. So these are his buildings. These can never be drawn again, whatever. They just went from board to construction. The shape just went away from the freedom to break away. Now, I'm not judging good or bad or anything in this scenario here at all. Okay, color came back in. Again, you know, whatever you want. I think they did crumple a whole bunch of stuff before they actually said, okay, create it. But I think the advent of the computer and the computer design actually allowed them to do these things. You know, so you can see the relationship that fashion had with it. Call it junk, call it architecture, whatever it is, but it's there. Then here's this man, we're closing, don't worry. We had this man, Santiago Calatrava. I think he's one of the most geniuses of the 21st century. I wouldn't even say 20th, the 21st century, you know. The reason I show this picture is that skeleton of a dog that he keeps on his desk, all the time on his desk. And that's why all the structures are related to the human structure, the ribs, the cage, and whatever. See here? This man broke another level of boundaries, another level of boundaries. This is the Greek Athens Olympic Stadium. This is the thing, I took a selfie there, so you see, I show you myself, of the Oculus. Now this is a train station. Now you can talk about grandeur, you can talk about oasis. This is the most expensive train station in the entire world. Okay, it's just a regular subway station. But nevertheless, its architecture was incredible. So you saw how building, fashion, look at this building. This is a building in Chicago. And this is, by the way, designed by a woman. This is the tallest building ever designed by a woman, just so you know. But you look at how fashion became very, very close to it, okay? Then, of course, in the final analysis, you know, the goddess herself, Zaha Hadid, she just loved flamboyance. Now, people call this most wow, and they said, okay, what a waste of a space. This has been called that way. Waste of a space, blah, blah, blah. Yet, it happens. So what did we get from all of this? This is the concluding thing now. Now, Gropius, you know, in 1930 said, let us together create the new building of the future, which will be all in one, architecture, sculpture, and painting. Okay? Now, a lot of these, Robert Venturi said, oh, modern architecture died in 1972. That's what he actually gave the date on it. So if I look at fashion, if I look at this architecture as art, what else can you say that architecture has not become art? I think that theory has continued onward and evolved in a very natural manner to give you get closer to closer. Maybe it took a century. 1920s was the Bauhaus, and you got 2020 here. Now you have a cycle that's been completed, and you now have to do it. Where we go from here is a different story. So we meanwhile back at the farm, we are doing this, we're doing this, and tell me what is what here. What do you think it is? World Trade Center. Oh, one of them is the World Trade Center. The other one is the building on Shara-e Faisal. Yes, on nursery. Go close next time you look at it. Okay? Yeah. Look, so what we are doing is in a sense aping and copying the West. Okay, here's a building in the West, and here's a building in Karachi right now. I just took a picture the other day. So one begins to think that this is just a continuation of the same thing. Pakistan has just been doing what it allowed, engineering allowed it, or whatever reason. So in the end, this is my saying, just like Peter said, design creates culture, culture shapes values, values determine the future. Okay? So I don't know how we're going from here, but you can choose your weapon for the 20th century, 21st century, and architecture, like engineering and the construction industry in Pakistan, must come out of their comfort zone and carve their own path to the future. I think we have been trapped in a comfort zone. We're not tearing out of it. Forget doing what Zaha Hadid did. We are way, way, way behind. And that is my message today. So I don't know if it's a narrative, but here it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Architect Ejaz Ahed Saab.